Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Security Space podcast. Today I'm joined by Phil Davies, the CISO of Equifax, and what we are going to be discussing is all about balancing innovation and risk. What do I mean by that? Well, it's a very commonly thrown about phrase in security, to be honest with you. And what we're going to be discussing is, again, quite a commonly discussed topic, and it is how to embed secure by design. But the caveat here is, how do we embed secure by design in an AI world, which we are now in? So what do I mean by that? Well, essentially, AI is exploding, innovation is exploding hand in hand with it, and security is trying its best to keep up. So what we are going to try and discuss today is how can we sort of bring security on that journey with, how can we avoid sort of making things and breaking things and actually embedding security from the get-go. But before we get into it, Phil, could you give the audience a little bit of an introduction to yourself, if that's okay?
Of course, Nick. So Phil Davies. As you say, I'm the CISO for Equifax for Europe, so UK, Spain, but also India. We're a wider business. We have CISOs in other regions, but my focus is mainly Europe. Prior to that, I was the global CISO for Planet Payment. And prior to that, I was a group director for security for Sky. And then before that, I was a detective with UK law enforcement, where I had the privilege of setting up one of the first, what we used to call high-tech crime units, we now call cybercrime. So my focus here at Equifax is really to run security, but to enable growth. So we do all the secure stuff, we have all the governance, we have the standards, we think about compliance, but for me that's baseline. I'm really focused on how do we move the dial and grow the business, how do we get into new territories and regions, and how do we use security as a differentiator to actually make that happen. So those are the things that drive me in my day-to-day role at Equifax.
Fantastic. So I think we're in safe hands for our topic today. So I suppose best way to sort of kick off with this one, though, is let's do a high-level overview then. Let's do this helicopter overview. Talk us through. I know a lot of the listeners will already know what it is, what secure by design is. It's not a new phenomenon in security, but explain what secure by design is, and then maybe caveat it with, has it changed over the last 3, 4, 5 years with the explosion of AI?
Okay, so I think it has changed. I'm not sure that it's changed because of AI necessarily. And don't forget, we've actually got quantum coming fairly soon. So when we think about changing things with artificial intelligence, machine learning, we're also going to be thinking in the not too distant future. And many of us are thinking about it right now in terms of quantum. So there are reasons that we change what we do. AI is just one of those reasons, in my view. So secure by design for me, and I think it's different for most people. So where I was talking about, we have to keep the business safe. We have to think about second and third line, this compliance mindset. We have to do those things because we have to comply in the UK with cyber essentials if we're in the government supply chain, or maybe if we're transacting card data with PCI. Or we may want a security standard like 27001 if it's a global standard we want, or even a capability and maturity model like NIST. All of those things we have and more, but they don't really secure anything by design. They tick some boxes. They help to demonstrate our credibility. They're important, but they don't keep us safe. They don't secure anything we're doing at the design stage. So for me, this is around that whole mindset in terms of shift left, and I think secure design is part of that. So we often talk about shift left, but when you talk to CTOs, CIOs, or CISOs, or anybody else that's involved in leading technology or security, they'll understand shift left, but they very rarely will put it into practice. And that's not a criticism, because it's time, it's resource, it's effort. There are other things that are pressing them day to day. So there's something to be said about putting the time aside to shift left and get into the earlier part of the process. So by that, what I mean is thinking about new products and innovation, thinking about new services, thinking about acquisitions, thinking about all of those things, instead of thinking about them in the security toll gate lane, at 90 days or 100 days, thinking about them right at the beginning.
Yep.
So for me, it's actually having the security team in the room with the designers, with the innovators, with the creators, right there on day one, helping to design the product or the service.
Yep.
Not even thinking about security by itself at that stage, but also thinking about security.
Yep.
And I say that because security people bring a mindset that can add value to products, not just keep them safe.
Mm-hmm.
So we get them in at that early stage. They then think about the product, the service, the change. They're part of that team. They're not just the second, third line that's coming in later.
Yep.
To adjudicate on something and to think about whether it's a risk we're willing to accept. They have a part to play right at the beginning in terms of helping design the product, including its security, and then where we need to go through those toll gates, those approval processes. Think about it like a duck, in that they are cool, calm, collective on top. Nobody else in the room sees all of the toll gates, the friction. They're managing and that taking it out of the room.
Yep.
And the rest of the team are not being slowed down. Innovation is not being stopped. We're not giving up. We're not giving away any security standards. We're not dropping them. In fact, because we're involved at the beginning, we're actually improving our position.
Yep.
So we're changing our mindset from how do we comply with all of these standards and the new standards coming in.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, we're thinking, how do we use security as a differentiator?
Yeah.
How do we use security to help to design the product and the rest of the team that we're working in? We no longer have to address the business because we are the business. So our whole language changes.
Yep.
And then because we're in at day one, we're able to then think about, actually, as we go through, as we launch this new product or service, there's things that we're going to need to do at different milestones. We may need to do tests, security testing, penetration testing. We might need to do scans. After we've released a product, it could be we need to do it every year. It could be have to do it every 6 months. They're already thinking about those things. They're thinking about the capital expenditure, the operational expenditure in year 2, in year 3.
Yep.
So we're not only involved at the beginning, but we're now thinking about security over the life cycle of the product that we've helped to design. So I think that establishes our credibility better.
Yep.
It means we're part of the team, we're part of the business, not talking to the business. And it changes the way that we are viewed by the leadership team as well. It shows that we're really adding that value.
Fantastic. No, that's really well put, and it's very clear that you're very passionate about bringing security in and making them seen as an enabler, not just coming in to whack a plaster on a big crack potentially at the end of a production cycle. I suppose the one underlying question throughout all of that fantastic explanation was, this is not a new thing. Is it purely ideological? Why is this not already sort of like mandatory for development teams and security teams to be working together? Because this has been going on for a couple of decades, maybe not a couple of decades, but definitely more than one decade. So what's the blocker, Phil?
So I think it's engagement. I think when you speak to many tech and security leaders, they'll talk about challenges they have with engaging with the board and with the leadership team. And this is around that language, speaking the language of the board. If you're part of the team, you help design the product, you're part of the business, your mindset changes, and you're now not having to address the business from the outside. So I think there's something to be said around mindset. I think there's a big part here around empowerment. So if we think of ourselves always as that second and third line with a compliance mindset, we're never going to innovate. We may keep the business really, really safe, but we're not going to be the people helping to grow. Yes. Let me give you an example. Very recently, the team here in Leeds came up with a suggestion. We moved that suggestion forward into development stage very quickly, very quickly, very cheap. We implemented something that actually we were so excited about that we patented it.
Okay.
Not only did we patent it, but we also are now talking to potential customers about selling it. So we're now not just designing a product, or being part of the team to design the product and keep it secure, but we're now thinking, because don't forget, security people have real skills real experience. Do we tap into that to grow our businesses? Unless we're a security consultancy, generally not. So we're missing a real opportunity by not engaging a really smart part of the workforce. That's what we're trying to do. So the patent team for us in the US, global patent pending, very excited about it, but it's not the first. I remember in previous careers talking to Visa. I remember talking to the Visa security team. They had a shed load of patents because they think innovatively, creatively. So I think it's about feeling part of the business. Why now? Because we have the opportunity, but also because in the very near future we're going to have regulations coming in that compel us to introduce secure by design. Whether that's through the cyber bill or act as it will become, whether that's through our supply chain and secure by design with the Digital Operational Resilience Act. And the public sector in the UK are leading the charge, because when you look at the way the Ministry of Defence works, they have secure by design built into their entire supplier framework. So you can't supply to the UK government unless you can demonstrate secure by design on day one. So it's not innovation just here. It's actually across the UK public and private sector. And I think now's the time, but it's going to be reinforced by regulation and acts in the near future anyway. So now's the time to do that. And it helps us plan from year to year in terms of our CapEx and OpEx budgets as well, because if we think about what we're going to be designing, how we might be innovating, we understand then what we're going to need to invest. So we're no longer just thinking about it being a cost center. We're now contributing to the business, possibly as a profit center. And I think that helps us too. And it also means that when we do want those second and third line investments, we're actually more likely to get them because we're not just keeping our business safe or our organization safe in the public sector, but we're helping with that growth and reach and the mission, whatever that mission is.
Absolutely. Obviously, one of my questions today would have been how can we make security teams more of an enabler rather than a blocker? And I think you pretty much answered that. And it is like, if you can get your security team basically contributing to the business strategy and actually getting it to return an investment, i.e. helping sort of influence a product and actually getting it patented, like you've mentioned, winner, because it's getting the monetary currency through the bank, but it's also getting that internal currency that when you're in the boardroom and you're speaking to the directors, you're like, well, my team, it's not necessarily, you've always viewed it as a cost centre. Well, look, it's not necessarily a massive cost centre because we're actually bringing in money to the business as well, and you can't do much more. A security team can't do much more, which then when the tables get turned, I imagine when you go needing, look, we need X and Y to deliver on a project, it's like, do you know what? Yeah, the security team, let's give them this roll of the dice because they've helped us out in previous turns, and it just gives that internal championing for the team, which I suppose in turn brings us back to the topic of around embedding secure by design, which is like, look, let's combine this development team with the security team because we can get them working in tandem, and it'll only work more efficiently for the company. So I can see how it all links. But like you say, I just wish more companies would adopt that methodology because it doesn't work across the board potentially until these new bills come in. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and I think people listening might be saying, well, actually, I don't have many people in my security team. That's all very well and good. And I think so. There's an old method that many people have tried over many years, which is introducing security champions. We've had privacy champions and so on in previous companies I've worked. We used to do this really well at Sky. I'm sure they still do. But when I think about security champions here, what we're doing is we're recognizing that actually we can't be everywhere. We can establish the guardrails. We can establish the policies, the principles, we can set the strategy, we can agree the direction with our partners in operations and technology, but we can't be everywhere. Security team is tiny compared to other teams. Technology teams generally, and we've just gone through a major transformation, technology teams are big, so we can't be everywhere. One of the things we can do is identify the people in those teams that have a real aptitude and interest for security and actually change the language when we speak to them. Instead of saying we need to comply with or we we could be at risk because under the Financial Conduct Authority, under the senior management framework, we could go to jail if we don't do X, Y, and Z. I think changing that mindset and thinking about it as a technical debt that we may be carrying forward if we don't get things right, which basically means that they could be in a position where we rush it through, we get it wrong, we then have to come back and remediate. That means that they're having to spend 30, 40 days doing something when they could have just spent 12 days getting it right in the first place.
Yep.
When you think about it as a technical debt rather than a security compliance issue, they then realize that it's friction we're removing away from them, and we're empowering them to make decisions because they're following the training, the guidance, the support we've given them. We can dip in when we need to, but we don't need to be there all the time. We're still responsible for the security, but we don't have to do everything all of the time. In the same way, the chief exec runs the company, or the managing director, they can't be everywhere all the time. They have a leadership team, and so on down the chain. So the technology teams, the operations teams, they're really important partners for us. And it's about identifying the right people to help us on this mission. It then means that when they're going through and implementing new products or services or significant changes, that remediation time later goes because they're thinking differently as they're going through the exercise, and as they're innovating and doing what they're doing with our support and guidance. They're reducing that friction later. It's just a payback in terms of time for them. That's important. So I think security teams are often small, compliance teams are small, risk teams are small, legal teams are small, and they're small because generally they are the second, third line. They're not bringing in business. That's not going to change by and large. There may be a few edge cases. We are there to help with that second, third line to keep people safe. Where we can vary from that and do more, brilliant, but we can't always do that. But it's about empowering other people. It's about recognizing, motivating other people to help us on that journey. We often say, and one of the first questions with standards like 27001 is, it's like an exam question: whose responsibility is security? And there's the multiple choice, and one of them is it's everybody's, and of course that's the right answer. Well, do we really mean that? Often we don't. We say it's everybody's, but then we say, but leave it with us. We'll make a decision. But we may take 90 days to get round to it. By that stage, we've lost that competitive edge. Somebody else has released a product, and it's yesterday's news. So it's about living and breathing that statement and actually making it everybody's responsibility, but not as a compliance focus, as an enabler.
That's a really good point, and I like how you it's all about focusing on the mindset and sort of shifting the view for it. And I suppose it segues very nicely. You've answered a lot of it, but it's more so if you could build on it. So how can you actually sort of view governance, policies, the culture of Equifax or any other company for listeners that might be listening? How can them three different segmented areas actually help deploy AI safely moving forward in this AI world? How can we use governance, policy, and culture?
Okay, so governance and policy, there's a lot of, and in governance is changing all of the time. So when you look at the emerging, the next 6 to 12 months in terms of the legal and governance, the legal and regulatory changes in the UK and the rest of Europe. Actually, you've got 3 or 4 new acts and bills coming through. They're going to change a lot of our governance. We're going to have to adapt, not just here but everywhere. So we have to think forward about how those are going to impact us. We have to plan for those. A big part of that, and it's not so much governing AI; it's using AI to do the governance better. Is if we need to be gathering data for let's say HIPAA or any other standards in the US, we need to think about the new Data Protection Act. In India, we need to think about new legislation here with the Cyber Act. We need to think about DORA, NIS2, and all these other things that are either here or coming. We're asked to gather information to prove our compliance with these things, whether we're in a supply chain or whether it's because we are part of the regulated industry affected, so directly or indirectly. There's a lot to be said around streamlining that evidence gathering, that compliance, that whole mindset, and leveraging AI to do that. So when we're going to do pen tests for one particular standard, let's gather it all together. Let's do it for all of the others. And actually, whilst we're at it, let's think about the contracts and the compliance that we have to. So public sector is a big one for us.
Yep.
We have some big public sector clients, and actually they have many of the same requirements that we have for some of those. They're not legal or regulatory frameworks, but PCI and ISO. So as we gather all of that, how can we use AI to do that? In terms of AI itself, in terms of governance, I think most businesses have AI governance committees, and for us, the entire leadership team sits on that because it's important to each of those verticals. So it's not owned by one particular. We're all in it together. It's not a security thing. It is everyone's. It's chaired by the managing director. So there is leadership from the top, but there's involvement and an expectation from the top. So we understand the risk. We work on that risk together, and that enables us to develop the right guardrails for people to leverage AI internally, and it gives us the confidence and the ability to say to people, we expect you to use AI in the workplace. So for us, we've got specific places we want them to use AI. It's around using the security awareness and engagement program for us as well, supporting their mandatory training, giving them the right guidance. So when people come to us in the security team and say, I want to do this with AI, can I? We then make sure that we're available and giving them the right answer. And actually, a big chunk of that is around reducing the emails and chat messages that we get, and actually using AI to actually streamline the questions we get about AI. So it's pervasive across the entire business. It presents opportunity far more than it does risk, but we do need to have the guardrails in place. So the obvious things, such as we don't want to use personal data in our AI environment, even within our internal AI environment, and customer data, without having the right safeguards in place. So making sure that staff, through their mandatory training, through their security awareness, through AI, we call them AI power hours. So one of my team goes out to the different sites and briefs, and we have surgeries where we listen to, we help, we support. We do that with compliance, we do that with privacy, we do that with risk. So it's a joined up process.
Okay, really interesting. And I suppose just to get into the absolute nuts and bolts of what we're speaking about today then, is what sort of risks, because you've sort of mentioned there, obviously, you make sure there's no personal data going out, no company information. What sort of risks are related to AI then? Is it data leakage? Is it model abuse? Or is it supply chain? You mentioned quite two out of three of them, to be honest with you. But yeah, what your thoughts are on the risks that AI actually exposes?
So from a traditional security mindset, I would say all three of those. But just taking a step back, I think the biggest risk is that we don't feel empowered to use AI. So I mean that from the point of view of, imagine, if you will, we've imposed so many guardrails, and people are so scared of using AI that we then don't do that innovation, including in the security space, and we don't feel confident. So when you speak to people, and I don't mean this from an Equifax perspective, but when I speak to people generally, there's an understanding of what AI is. There may be some use cases, but in many organizations and businesses, we've handed somebody the keys to a nice shiny red Ferrari, and we've said, go drive, but don't worry about driving lessons, don't worry about insurance, and don't worry about a test or insurance. Everything's fine. So for me, the biggest risk is that we don't train, empower, encourage people to use AI because it will save them a huge amount of time and effort. Is that a security risk? In part, yes, it is, but it's a really big business risk. So it's a huge tool. If we don't use it, the risk is that we'll be overtaken by others in any industry that we're in. So we should be using it. Then moving to the traditional security risks. So yes, supply chain is a big one.
Yep.
So I mentioned the Ministry of Defence, UK government are very interested in secure by design. AI plays a big part in that. They are particularly interested in their supply chain, and we're in that supply chain, demonstrating how they use both secure by design and AI responsibly.
Yep.
And it's the same for us with our suppliers. We need to understand what risks they might pose,
yep.
whether that's data sovereignty, whether that is AI, whatever those risks are. We need to understand. We need to be able to talk to our customers about our supply chain.
Yep.
So it kind of goes both ways. I then think there's something around, yes, the model governance. So a big part of that is understanding you've got the keys to the car. Where can I drive it? How quickly can I go? Secure by design enables you to move things along a lot quicker.
Yep.
Because we've got the brakes in place, so you can drive a lot faster, do things much faster, but you understand where you can step in and slow things down. So they go hand in hand. And there's a lot around, and there always will be, AI and across technology as a whole in terms of how we deal with data.
Yep.
So I never think of personal data alone. I always think of, you have Privacy and Information Commissioner's Office, and that's around the data relating to living individuals.
Yep. Personal
data, we get that. That's not interested in payment card industry data security standards. It's not interested in banking data. So what data do we want to keep safe, including how we use it with AI, and without segregating that? So we're not doing that heavy lifting just for privacy. We're not doing that heavy lifting just for PCI. We're thinking about that in our data classification scheme together. So we're not duplicating that work.
Yep.
So yes, being across how we can monitor, how we can support, is the policy, is the training right, to make sure that people are not using AI irresponsibly, including putting data where it should not be. There's a lot also around the quality of the data, which is important with the Data Protection Act, of course. So making sure that that data is actually up to date.
Yep.
And that we don't assume that the data we're getting from AI without testing it is absolutely correct. So, we've seen some horrendous examples in the last year reported, including law enforcement making decisions relying on AI in relation to football matches, for instance. So testing that data, the quality of that data, and that sits under the governance, I think, really as well. That's important.
Fantastic, really, really good point. And just to kind of summarise that, Bill, more than anything, is what would be your one key takeaway for anybody listening today that might be like, look, I need to embed secure by design in this AI world? What would be your one key takeaway as a high level overview?
So I think if we're thinking about security professionals, for me, I think it's quite common to find security professionals, and I have seen this elsewhere, that don't really understand the products and services that are being offered, sold, or the mission of their public sector bodies. They are focused solely on their security domain. I think it's understanding how we use our security knowledge and skills, because the one thing I've never met is a security person that can't enable their organisation or business to do things better, because generally they're really quite smart, engaged, and well motivated. So understanding where we are in the organisation, to change our language so that we're not trying to speak the language of the board, because we're all speaking the same language.
Yep.
So we need to just think about how we communicate and how we engage, is my personal view.
Okay. Perfect. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And look, that brings us to our time, Phil. So if anybody has any questions for what Phil's raised today, or just like to get involved, pick his brains or anything like that, I'll be sure to put his information down below. Once again, Phil, thank you very much for coming on Security Space.
Thanks, mate.